By the third day of the investigation, the case was already solved. At least, that's what everyone believed. The evidence made sense. The timeline matched. The motive felt obvious. And every clue pointed to the same person. Daniel Harper, a quiet neighbor. Predictable routine. No criminal history. The kind of suspect detectives secretly hope for. Someone who fits the story perfectly. There was only one problem. One detail so small, it was almost ignored. A detail that didn't prove he was innocent, but refused to prove he was guilty. At first, no one questioned it, because when a story feels complete, the human mind stops looking for missing pieces. But that single inconsistency would slowly unravel everything investigators thought they understood, and years later, it would raise a question far more unsettling than who committed the crime. How many people believed the truth, simply because it looked convincing? Daniel Harper didn't look like someone hiding anything. He lived alone, worked remotely, and followed routines so predictable that neighbors described him as invisible. Every morning, the same coffee shop. Every evening, the same walk around the block. When detectives first spoke to him, he answered calmly, almost helpfully. And strangely, that calmness became the first reason people distrusted him. Because grief usually looks emotional, fear looks nervous, but Daniel looked normal. Too normal. The timeline placed him near the scene. Security cameras showed his car passing the street minutes before the incident. His phone signal connected to a nearby tower. Individually, none of it meant much. Together, it formed a perfect story. And humans trust stories more than facts. Detectives didn't begin by asking if Daniel was guilty. They began asking how he did it. And once a question changes, the investigation changes with it. Interrogations lasted hours. Daniel repeated the same explanation again and again. He had gone for a drive to clear his mind. No destination. No witnesses. An answer that sounded honest, but impossible to verify. Silence filled the room more often than questions. Investigators watched carefully, waiting for cracks, but none appeared. And somehow, that made him look more suspicious. Because people expect innocence to defend itself emotionally. Daniel defended himself logically. 3 days into the investigation, a junior analyst reviewed the evidence again, not searching for guilt, only organizing files. That was when she noticed it. A timestamp. Barely 2 seconds off. Small enough to ignore, but large enough to change everything. If the timestamp was correct, Daniel couldn't have arrived when investigators believed he did, which meant one assumption, just one, might be wrong. At first, no one reacted, because changing one detail meant reopening the entire case, and certainty feels comfortable, doubt feels expensive. She checked again, and again. The result stayed the same. The camera clock had never been synchronized properly. Every timeline built around it began to shift. Suddenly, the story still worked, but Twine Tiber Stenberm. Turedejo Brainen, not Lestline Dan. And perfection is often what convinces us most. Detectives faced an uncomfortable realization. They hadn't followed evidence to reach Daniel. They had followed Daniel to interpret the evidence. When investigators rebuilt the timeline using corrected times, something unexpected appeared. Another vehicle. Previously dismissed. Previously irrelevant. now impossible to ignore. The investigation quietly changed direction. Questions softened, interrogation stopped, and Daniel went home. No announcement, no apology, just silence. Months passed. Charges were never filed. Officially, the case remained open. Unofficially, everyone moved on, except Daniel. Because suspicion doesn't disappear when evidence changes. It lingers, in looks, in silence, in conversations that end when you walk into the room. Years later, one investigator admitted something unsettling. The evidence didn't convince them Daniel was guilty. The story did. It felt complete, logical, satisfying. And the human brain prefers a convincing explanation over an uncertain truth. The most disturbing part of the case wasn't that investigators were wrong. It was how easy it was to believe they were right. One small detail, almost invisible, separated certainty from truth. And it leaves a question that extends far beyond one investigation. How often do we decide someone's story makes sense, and stop searching for the part that doesn't? Because sometimes, the difference between guilt and innocence isn't evidence. It's the moment someone finally notices, the detail everyone else learned to ignore. Last choice. No way back.